Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time I've got a second shunting session. So loads of new books have come my way recently and they all need filing away into the collection. We got vintage corgis, pans, penguins, pelican books, Fontanas, panther books, spear. There's a huge amount that all needs sorting and filing back into the collection. Doubles to be compared. So that is what we're going to be having a look at today, and I'm sure you're going to really enjoy it. So without further ado, get yourself a nice cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get to it. Okay then, so what has prompted this is that quite recently, in the last month or so, I have ended up picking up two pretty big collections. One of them was a big military collection. It was 6 boxes of military paperbacks, and they were across all different sorts of publishers. In a lot of cases, they were an original owner, so one person had bought them and they'd not been through the second-hand market, so consequently they were in particularly nice condition. They were very cheap. I did very well on them, but there was also, about a third of it went to the charity shops. A nice wage went to my dad to read, and the rest I've kept. And you'll see a lot of those today where I sort of go through the books, like for example, Panther books, where I've already got the books. I just will compare them against what I've got to get the best sort of copies. So that was the first big collection I had this month. The second was a really nice run of almost pristine, unread, it appears unread, vintage science fiction books. And they were a bit more recent, sort of from about 67, 68 up to 73, 74, with a sprinkling of books from a little bit later. And they were in there as well. So I've got all of that to go away, as well as all my sort of usual pickups from my usual sources. So an odd book, from eBay here, an odd book there. I had a couple of little deliveries from Penguin Book Specialists, so I got a fair old batch of Pelicans this month, which I was really pleased with, and also a little delivery from Drew, the Penguin chap, where I managed to get a couple more off my wants list, and also from a viewer. So it's been quite a time for new books to come in. So what you're seeing me do right now, these are my miscellaneous British paperbacks. So these are publishers which I've only got a handful of books, so it doesn't really warrant them all being separate on their own sort of bookcase. They're just by publisher and then sort of A to Z. If the publisher has a numbered series, then I'll put them in number order, but else if they're a little bit later, sort of in the realms of ISBN, I shall pop them in by author's surname. And that's what I'm doing there. So this is a real mixture. Those blue ones there are Mayflower Dells. And this shelf here is just below my movie and TV tie-in collection. And similar to what you saw last time round, if you watched that last sort of shunting video, you'll see I tend to put, on these particular bookcases, I'll put 3 stacks next to each other along the back wall, and then I'll put a row of books in front, and that's sort of maximising the space but not making it completely unusable, because else they might as well just be in boxes, to be honest, and put into storage. I do like the fact that I know where the stuff is, and I can pretty much, without too much effort, actually get my hands on most of the books that I'm after. Now, because of the amount of books that I've got in my collection, I have to use every little nook and cranny. So these aren't really on display. They are on display. They're available. I've got like a lot of this up just in my loft, and I've got stuff behind it which is all like boxes of old toys and things like that, and that's behind these bookcases. But at least, because I film a lot of paperback content, at least I can get to these whenever I want it. And don't forget, on my other channel I am systematically going through my collection and giving them a really good clean. Looking at some of the Pelicans that we see at the end of this video, I thought, wow, these early ones really, really are going to benefit from going through the process, as it were. But there you are. So you see, most of my bookcases are packed in this way. So I've got them all in order by publisher, and then by number or author surname. Then I've done 4 stacks at the back, and then I'll put a row in front. And that's basically how I do it. But yeah, because this is on the bottom, I'm literally on my hands and knees. And in actual fact, this entire video was filmed over 4 days, if you can believe it. So it actually took longer to film than the last one, but I think it was worth it, and the collection looks great now. It's in a really good position, and I won't need to do another one of these for, you know, quite a long time now. I wouldn't have thought. I've only got one sort of trip where potentially I might pick up a few books, but it's a trip to another dealer, so the books are not going to be cheap. They'll be dealers' prices, and because of that, it's unlikely I'm going to be buying loads. Now, one book that did turn up in that science fiction lot was that copy there of The Making of Kubrick's 2001. And that copy is absolutely superb. I mean, it's beautiful. And I was comparing it there to the one that's already in my collection. Now, I was checking the printing because the one in the collection was a 5th print, but the one that I already had was also a 5th print. So evidently, my suspicion is that that's the printing that got imported into the UK, and it was then distributed by the New English Library as an American import. So the one that came in that science fiction collection was by far, you know, twice, maybe 3 times better than the copy I already had. So that's the one I've kept. And then I'm just sorting out this last sort of shelf of slightly larger movie and TV tie-in books.
Thank you.
And we'll be back to this little bit. Next to it, to the left, is the tail end of my Pelicans a bit later on. So we're now looking at filing away the Fontanas. So I had a huge pile of Fontanas, perhaps about 20 to 25 new ones, maybe even a little bit more than that. And I've also had them out for a couple of videos recently. So I had a few that were already out of position, because these early Fontanas that I'm looking through now are all numbered. Not all of mine are first editions, but if they're reprints and they're in nice condition, I will keep them, because I'm not fastidiously trying to get them all in first edition like my Penguin books. So the first thing I'm doing here, they're in rough order, pretty much rough order, but I'm just double checking that everything is absolutely in the correct order, like there was one there that wasn't. And then I'll start filing away all the new additions to the collection, and then eventually I'll get them popped onto the bookcase. So that's what we're doing here now. Now, I really, really like Fontana books. When you start to get a few of them, they do become a bit addictive. Now, these Fontana came about as the Collins, the distinctive, you know, green and black Collins books that started in the late 30s. As they came to a close, which was, you know, the late 1940s, that early 50s, that is when Fontana came along. They had all the same sort of authors, a lot of the crime authors, a lot of the Agatha Christie's, but they moved them from Collins over into Fontana. And they're very, very nice. The covers generally are not by named artists. So, like, if you look at the Pam books, for example, there's lots of artists that you're familiar with, people like Peff and Rex and W. Francis Phillips. With Fontana, they're not like that. And my suspicion is, in a lot of cases, they are just Fontana house artists who worked at Collins full time, and they just, you know, were given a commission to knock up, and that's what they did. I am a particular fan. Later on, from about 1967-68, artist Tom Adams took over painting the jackets for the Agatha Christie's, and he ended up doing virtually all of them, and they are fantastic. And they're amongst my favourite vintage paperbacks, although they're not as vintage as most of my stuff. They are, as I said, very late 60s they started, so 67, 68, up until 83, 84, and by that time he'd pretty much done them all. But they're a particular run that I like. There's one there, for example, Mirror Cracked, From Side to Side, and that was a Tom Adams jacket. A few later ones here. But yeah, Fontana, quite a nice little publisher to collect. Hardly ever see them out and about anymore. And they used to be so plentiful, I remember. But at the time, when I started collecting paperbacks, it was predominantly Penguin and Pan. I just couldn't, I didn't have the room to collect anything else, in all honesty. So I just didn't bother. And that's consequently why I'm enjoying doing it now, sort of in later life. I'm loving pulling these early other publishers' paperbacks together, and the channel's put me in a good position to be ready to pounce on a few collections and things like that come my way. Also to request books. So you may have seen recently I did put up a little video where it was sort of books wanted, paperbacks wanted, ones that I'm after to finish my own collections, and when I put that video out, I was in need of 9 Penguins to finish the first 1,000 in first edition, and I got 3 of them. So I got 2 of the later crossword books and 1 of the pre-war crime titles. So I'm now just down to 6, which is, it seems almost attainable, doesn't it? After starting to collect them, over 30 years ago. The end is in sight, shall we say, which would be fantastic. These are all new Fontanas to my collection, but a lot of these I already had, unfortunately, so I'm just going through and pulling the best condition ones. So at the end of this, I pulled together a box of about, I think it was about 70 paperbacks that were doubles. And I've pulled all of those to one side, and I brought them here into the studio because I'm planning another sales video where I do a video showing all the books I've got spare. Probably early January I'll do that, so look out for that then. But there's a real mixture of stuff to come again, so I'm bound to have a few more bits to add to it before January as well. But yeah, lots of these, you see I just had doubles of them. So I'm just picking up either the first printings or the better condition printings, if both of mine are originals. I do love upgrading. I've done lots of it over the years with my Pan and Penguin books, and it does make a difference. Had that Rommel book a couple of times before as well. It's interesting, some books just keep turning up again and again. They must have just been big sellers when they were published. But I never get tired of the Fontanas. So ideally, what I'm looking to do, and it may be a couple of years away at the moment, is I'm going to have a dedicated room which is going to be a library. There is a small chance that we may end up moving house. I don't particularly want to do that, but if we do move, it's going to need to be somewhere which, I can have a room which is already a studio, for example, and also a dedicated library room. So here we are then. So this is one of the more recent IKEA bookcases. These ones you can get from IKEA. They're very, very basic, but they're like £19. Although I have heard IKEA are putting their prices up. But I think they're brilliant value for money. Absolutely brilliant. So we'll just see me, now that I've sorted all the Fontanas out, this is them going back into situ. The shelf underneath is Hard Case Crime, the American crime publisher who I really like. And just above it is Badger Books and the Executioner American Men's Adventure series. But yeah, going back to the library idea, so it'll be it'll be like a large bedroom basically, and all the walls will be wall-to-wall bookcases, and then there'll be like a U shape in the middle of the room with a nice chair and table to sit down and do some reading in, surrounded by the books, which is like my idea of heaven, really. And I'll be at that big U in the middle. We'll be able to have books back to back, but all the other walls will be literally floor to ceiling with purpose-built paperback bookcases. But I have also got, a fair run of hardbacks and larger format annuals, and they're going to need to go somewhere as well. So my initial idea was to perhaps have the large format books going along the top, literally just underneath the ceiling, as it were, the top row, and everything else sort of paperback size. And when I say paperback size, I mean A format and B format will fit in there comfortably, and that would be about it. So that is technically the plan to happen over the next few years, and it's certainly something that I would like to do, so we can take all these books out of the loft. I can get them all out into lovely long rows. You can see all these Fontanas all nicely together in their chronological order, which they are here now, but it's hardly, spine art, is it? It is very much serving a purpose, but they're not going to go bad. I know exactly where they are. I know exactly what I've got, because I've got all of these catalogued. All my collection's pretty much catalogued now. So I know exactly what I've got, and I know exactly where it is. So it's all good. It's all good. Right, now, as I said, I only had a small pile of penguins, so it didn't warrant pulling the whole lot out and doing a massive shunting session again like I did last time. Because last time I had over 2 box loads of new penguins to put in. So all I'm doing with these new editions is one of the rare crime ones I got, is just popping them near where they're supposed to be. And next time I do a proper shunting session, I will actually slip those in. That crime one, of course, still needs to be bagged as well because it's quite fragile. But yeah, just a little handful of penguins to do today, not many. And I didn't pull them all out or anything. I think I had 1 or 2 odd doubles in there as well that had come my way. Like that one, I had to compare copies. Can't really see it very well because I'm sort of eclipsing the entire camera. So I've tried to mix this up a little bit, this particular video, and do a few different sorts of camera angles, but I think you get a really good idea of how the collection is. So not much in the way of new Puffins rather, but I did have a small handful to file away. So these are Puffin storybooks, and these were basically, I was sorting them out so that I could get the second 100 out for a cleaning video, because it was their turn. I've already cleaned the first 100, which I've got complete, but the second 100, they took a little bit of I haven't got them all for starters, and they've never been cleaned, so there were quite a few, incredibly, when I got round to doing it, that actually had spines and front, the jackets that had come completely off, so the covers had come detached, and it was just down to the glue. This certain period, sort of in the early 1960s, it would appear that the glue that Puffin used on the books hasn't really aged, because these books are now 60 years old, some of them, and in that time the glue has just hardened and it's dried out completely, and the books have lost their suppleness and the covers have literally just come off. The book blocks are all together, they're fine, but it's an easy fix. You just need to run the old Pritt stick across the spine and across the inside cover of the book, and put them back in position again. But it was interesting to see. I had no idea that so many had gone that way, and it must have just been down to the glue that was used at the time. That particular run includes number 161, which is the first paperback printing of The Hobbit, which is pretty cool. And there were a few errors in the original text which Puffin corrected, and apparently Tolkien took offence at that and refused that they even reprint the book. So that was that. So that'd be a very interesting I very much like to have a look in the Penguin archive for Puffin Storybook 161, because it was the only time Penguin published any of the Hobbit or Lord of the Rings titles. Actually put up a little post on Twitter of these books when I was doing it, and someone, a Tolkien fan, tweeted me back a picture of the original artwork for the Puffin edition of The Hobbit, which is in, I think, a university in Missouri in the States, and all framed up. It's absolutely beautiful. Very, very nice. So what I've had to do is get rid of the first batch of specials, which comes after these Puffin storybooks, and then I can fill this shelf up properly and slide all the new additions in, which is exactly what I've done. There we are. I think that was number 200 just gone up. And now that they're all back in place and I've filed away my new additions, I can safely put the next row back into its spot. And then we got the first specials going on in front of them there. Great series, love the Penguin specials. Okay, so I realised I'm going to need a little bit of room, because that shelf I'm pulling books from now is my Panther bookcase, or Panther bookshelf. So these are a few promotional Pan related items. So they've gone up to that shelf there, and that's given me just enough room, I would hope, to get all my new Panther books added to the collection onto the one shelf. So I'm just taking off the front row here. Been picking up a fair bit of Panther SF lately. A lot of it was highlighted in a brand new book that's been published, Ray Guns and Rocket Ships by Ryan Hughes. Absolutely fantastic book, looking at sort of the history of British science fiction cover art. It really is terrific. Beautiful little hardback. I've done a review on the channel, so I do suggest you take that out, or check that out rather, because it's just a real labour of love. It's really, really something, and beautifully designed. Okay, so I've got, that is the Panther collection now, all in a big row. Now, a lot of the ones that I picked up in the military collection were doubles. So, you know, I was ending up doubling up. So I just pull out my original copies, put them side by side, and then I'll potentially keep the best one. And in most cases, because those military books were books that had come from an original owner, the copies that I was comparing were miles better than the ones that were already in my collection. So I did quite a bit of swapping around. It was just a shame that there was so many doubles rather than books that were new to my collection, but it's okay. I'll be able to pass them on to another collector in time, so that's absolutely fine. And Panther, they're a great little publisher, they really are. That was actually one I needed. It's another double. It's crazy when you have duplicates of vintage paperbacks. I remember in the past I've had some Pan books where I've had 4 or 5 copies in my hand of the same book. It's just crazy. But I'm much stricter now. I can't afford the space for multiple copies of loads of books. So I just, unless it's something I absolutely love, I very much stick to just one copy of it. There's a couple of exceptions, but not many. Certainly Day of the Triffids is a book I do collect in, if it's an edition I haven't got, I'll try and pick it up if it's fairly well priced. And Colditz is another one I do that for. Colditz and the latter days of Colditz. But all these were sadly doubles. They're all doubles. So all I can think of is they just sold very well at the time, which is why they've ended up. I've already got them. But as I said, we don't mind because I'll be able to pass them on to other collectors, which is always good. And as you know, when I do my sell videos, the books are starting at just like £1, up to like top price is about £3.50. So, and that one I already had, but I had the one on the right, which is the new one, was a reprint. So I already had the original of it, so that's the one I'm keeping. Even though it had a different cover, the reprint, I'm not too fussed about it. I think I was just showing up there a copy of Flying Saucers Have Landed, which is a really great Panther that I love, one that I've had for years. And now that those first couple of stacks there are all in order, I can move along to the slightly later Panther books now. Couldn't believe it. Even that one had a double of. It was like, what are the chances of having so many doubles in one like little collection? Absolutely nuts. They must have been the best-selling Panther books of all. Is all I can think of. These are my tail end ones now. Got some Panther SF there. That's all just going to be by author's surname A to Z. I have got a fair run of J.G. Ballard in Panther SF, which is separate. So I've got a little pile of my Ballard books separate to the publishers. There we are. That was the Panther books. So they're pretty much ready now to go back into that bottom row of that bookcase, which I'm hoping they all fit in. Oh, I forgot I had another big pile of Panther SF. There we are. So I need to get all of that into the one bookcase, which I did. You'll be pleased to hear. I didn't film it. I've now done a similar process where I've dug out all my Ian Fleming books. So these are all my James Bond books. And they're in published order. And I've got 5 or 6 potential doubles. And then I've got some later Granada Triad ones, which I don't think I've got at all. So I'm just going to go through my different editions and make sure there's no improvers there to the ones that I've already got. I'm not trying to collect every printing, just any of the different cover designs and or prices is what I'm trying to collect, with the early Pan ones at least. I just want one of each cover design, and any little variations, of which there's quite a few. So when I do pick up a James Bond lot, it's usually in a bundle. I like to give them a clean, and then I'll see what's what against the ones in my collection, and that's what I'm doing here now. I'm also going to be doing a video fairly soon with my top 10 vintage James Bond book jackets, and this was giving me a few little ideas of which ones I might choose. But I never get bored going through my Bond books. They're just so great. Yeah, so that red one I didn't actually own, and it had a bit of a faded spine, so it's in there on borrowed time. It's I marked it as an upgrade, that one. Yeah, not a lot between those two. They're both the movie tie-in editions. Sometimes they're like that. I do love the Bond books though. I absolutely love them. And I collected the Bond books in Pan. I think it was the first series I properly tried to collect after, when I was a kid. This is after getting into the Doctor Who books and collecting those. I think it was the Bond books, because my dad gave me his collection, and that was really good. That was a good backbone. He said, "Oh yeah, you can have those now," and that was it. I read them all and really loved the books. Really enjoyed them. They're good reads today. Fleming was a great writer. And there's those Granada Triad editions, of which I don't think I had any in the end, or maybe just one. So what I needed to do was get those popped back in position. So I'm just stacking the other Bond books up now, because this is how they're going to go back on the shelf in a minute. Then I can pull along some of the later books. And I'm pretty sure I filmed them going back on the bookcase, unlike the Panthers. So these ones I'm popping in now date from the late 70s, early 80s, and that's probably about as late as I'm going to go with these original Bond paperbacks. But they're very nice. I enjoy them. Right. So this is my dedicated James Bond bit, and it's sort of right in the middle of my Pan book collection. But they're all pulled from the main run, so I've got all my Bond books together, and that's how I like to have them. I've got a few bits of replica Bond POS dotted around, and some original stuff as well. Delicately, what you don't see there is me getting the next stack of books, which I'm delicately holding upside down so I can put them straight back into place. I mean, they are just amazing. I love them. That Agatha Christie thing there, The Secret Adversity, that's a proof cover. So it was never on a book. It was slightly smaller. It was just like a printer's proof of the jacket, which is quite nice. That's the more recent stuff. And then my little run of American paperback first as well, which I don't have anything. I've got about half of them, so still quite a way to go, yeah, on those. And there they are, with a couple of standees on top. Good stuff. My little Bond bit. Now I had just a few Pam books, which once again, they were ones that were on the whole, I think, already in my collection. I just needed to see if the copies were better. So some of them I pulled out. I pulled the shelves out, some of them didn't bother. That was another copy of Coleridge. So I told you there's not many books I collect multiple editions of, but that particular copy of Coleridge was mint unread. It was a reprint, but it was mint and unread. So for that reason, I've decided to keep it. But other ones, I was hoping that there was a chance that these books were just going to be on the outside and I could easily check them. Sadly, that was not to be, because that's just not my luck. So it still involved a bit of de-shelving and shelving. But as I said, I don't want you to look at books hanging around, so I needed to get in there, dig out my original and see which one was best. Struggling a little bit there to check the numbers. But because I was filming, I had one of my spotlights up in the loft, and it does make looking at the books a bit easier with a nice big spotlight flooding in there. Never get bored with my Pam book collection. Really, really love them. Put the old beer towels on, stop the dust getting at them. And that one will wait for the next shunting session, should there be one. I needed to do something similar on the bottom shelf as well, sadly. So back on my hands and knees. Just to compare the one book. Another one that needed comparing. I think some of these pans I must have had like 10 times the more common ones, you know. But it's always worth just double checking against the ones in your own collection. Even if I have to wait 6 months till I have a session like this to actually do it, it's always worth doing. Straightening that bottom shelf up there. And pop the beer towels back on. Now we're on to some of the great pans and the pan giants. And you see these are next to the bond books. And these bookcases are back to back. I've got another 2 of each back to back against these ones. So this is one old book that I needed to compare. It was up quite high on top of the bookcases, so they're virtually up to the ceiling. I said I don't like to waste any space if I can help it. I do like the way that my friend Tim has got his pan books in his library, you know, with the purpose-built bookcases, certainly designed to fit a lot of vintage paperbacks in there, and they look great.
Hello. All right.
This one I actually needed, which was quite nice. A rare addition to the pan collection. Another one comparing it here. I think that's the very first giant Eastern approaches. The new copy that came in looked immaculate. A few more just to slip in. I think some of them are just either doubles or you see there's a couple there already which need to be slided in next time I do a proper shunting session on these pans. I'll wait till I've got a few more, in all honesty, before I go right through the collection again. So I was just checking to see if I already had these or not, and happy to say I didn't. So these were brand new to the collection, so always nice to get new additions. Now, these tail end ones here, so this is my collection of ones which are not part of the pan numbered series. So when the numbering finished, so say for example G562 or M240, the next wave of pan books just had the letter, so G or M or T, O, Z, and the letter depended on how much the book was. It was price specific. So the higher the letter, like a Z for example, meant that the book was very expensive. So the way that my pan collection is shelved here, I've got the normal main run of the catalogue numerically, then I've got the letters, and then after that I've got the ones which had just come out ISBN only, so sort of from 1970 onwards, and then they're sorted by author surname. So that's what you're seeing here. Unfortunately, I have run out of room on the pan books, so I do get them all out. I have a little bit of a shuffle around to get them back into order, including all the new editions, and I've got one or two odd doubles. I've got a Philip K. Dick double, which is quite good, Galactic Pot Healer, but apart from that, they're all new to me, and I very much do need another shelf for my pan books now. But, you know, eventually. But for the time being, this is going to have to do. So that's the tail end. The white spined ones there are the tail end of the what they call the pan pipers. Then we've got the numerical, the letter ones there, starting with the A's, and then we'll go into the ISBNs. So in the last video, it was predominantly Pan and Penguin. I had both entire collections off, didn't I? And that was quite a major one. The Penguin we've already seen, very, very light this time round, and this is about as comprehensive as the Pans get. It's just these last few tail enders that needed sliding in. But as long as they look good at the end, that's all that matters. And they do. Now, when I filmed this, I just had my winter flu jab and fourth COVID jab, and I realised that I was probably not in the best of shape to come up into the loft, get on my hands and knees and start moving books around. So I believe I do take a little break after this after this lot. There's the double of the Philip K. Dick. As I said, I did film, in the end I filmed this over 4 days, so it wasn't all done in one hit because it is quite tiring. I'm sharing this with my patrons early, and ordinarily I would share like the video on the Sunday morning, but I haven't, because it's taken so long to film. I didn't film the last bit until Sunday morning, which, as you'll see at the end of this video, it was all the Pelican books. So my patrons are going to be having their video a little bit later on Sunday than usual, but I'm sure they don't mind because they're so good. And there we are, look. Thank you to all my Patreon and channel members. I try and thank them in each video if I can, and some of these people have been with me a very long time, and I very, very much appreciate it. YouTube ad revenue is very up and down, and it can't really be relied on, whereas if you support me through YouTube channel memberships or go into the Patreon website, that is a fantastic way to help the channel going forward. So if you do decide to do that, thank you very much. So popping these last few back onto the bookcase now, and there isn't quite room to get them all in, so I'm having to go, against my better judgment, to the shelf above. But it's the only solution. I've got nowhere else to go, sadly. Okay, so now this was a completely empty bookcase, empty bookshelf rather, except that little pile there of George Orwell books. So basically, when I last did my penguin shunting session, I made some room, and I was able to create this bookshelf rather, for additional penguins should they come my way. However, I've had very, very little. Well, you've seen it's been about 6 books since I last did that. So for the time being, I'm going to use this empty bookshelf for my advantage. So I've got some different publishers here. I was thinking of pulling all my Sphere books together. So Sphere is a publisher I only had a little handful of beforehand, but I got quite a bit in that science fiction collection, and these are in excellent condition. They're very much a 70s, early 80s sort of a publisher. So all I'm doing here now is get them by author surname first of all, and then I'm going to slide these Sphere books in here for the time being. But they're all over the place when they're being sorted, so that's what I'm doing now. Apologies if you can hear a lawnmower in the background. Someone's just started up. I'm sure it won't be very long. You may or may not be able to hear it. So yeah, I also had a couple of Get Carter books. Jack Ryan. Ted Lewis was the author, and the character was called Jack. Jack Carter, not Jack Ryan. But yeah, the Jack Carter books from Ted Lewis, and they're quite scarce, those, and they came out as Sphere books as well back in the day. So that's the Spheres in. Now what I've done, because I'm going to need some space for my Foursquare books, I've pulled over to put next to them my reprint Doctor Who paperbacks. This is Doctor Who paperbacks that are in immaculate condition, but these are reprint ones with different jackets in a lot of cases. So that's what that little pile is. And I've also pulled together my run of Pan Book of Horror Stories to go next to it, which is my main run, plus my second set, which is for reading copies. So they are also not in with my main Pan collection. These are separate, my Pan horror books. And as I said, I've got two sets on the go of those. And then I put the George Orwell's back in there. That's the George Orwell essays and letters collection, which I got 2 sets of that because it's so good. So on the bottom shelf is where the Pan horror and the Doctor Who's were. So now I'm going through my vintage Foursquare collection. There was a couple of books that I had in duplicate, so once again I'm just checking to see which copy is the best, and that'll be the one that I keep, because I love Foursquare, but for some reason they've not really survived in the greatest of conditions. Don't know why that is, just they haven't. They are slightly bigger than standard A format. But now I'm starting to clear this bottom shelf off, because I've got a fair batch of additional Foursquares, but they're predominantly later ones in my Foursquare collection. Here we are, I had a double of The Longest Day. Neither of them were a first printing. Seems to be quite common that as a reprint for the movie tie-in to the great film. One I haven't watched in a while, actually, The Longest Day, but it's pretty good as I recall. There we are, sliding them back in once they've been checked. And Foursquare, of course, they were kept going as Foursquare from sort of the mid-1950s, about 1955 they started. And they went as Foursquare right the way up to about 67, 68, and then they became the New English Library. They sort of morphed into them. And New English Library is a very collectible publisher. I don't have a lot of the rare ones, but they published a lot of sort of edgy stuff. They did sort of the biker books, quite a lot of drug-related stuff, and they are quite collectible because of that. But I've not got much in that way. Most of mine is just the normal sort of fiction. They did, of course, New English Library publish all the Edge cowboy paperbacks, the Western books, which I very much do enjoy those. That's that second edition of Robert Heinlein's The Starship Troopers, which is really, really great Foursquare edition. Both of them are great, in fact. One of my favourites. Another nice book there, Girl on a Motorcycle. This is where it's starting to morph into the New English Library, but it's still keeping the Foursquare numbering. So it's a sort of Foursquare book, New English Library, and the numbering is correct. I've got quite a bit which isn't in this main run. So a lot of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. books came out as New English Library Foursquares. Also, there's a run of superhero books that I've got. The British reprints of Spider-Man, Hulk, Fantastic Four, Daredevil came out as Foursquares, which I've got, but they're in those separate collections. They're not in with my Foursquare books here. They did some Batman adaptations as well, but all those are in their separate TV, film and comic collections. So now I'm going to put my A to Z by author New English Library paperbacks along the bottom there, and that's chronologically how these were published. So I'm just sorting those out now. Once again, I've got a few others separate. I've got a little horror stash, so it includes the early James Herberts were in New English Library as well, along with the Stephen Kings, actually, and very, very collectible. Right, next publisher we're going to have a stab at is CORGI. Now, once again, my CORGI books are woefully short of space. So what I've decided to do is the ones that were more modern, so larger format, the traditional A format, tail end numbered CORGIs, as well as the ones that went into ISBN. Those are in a separate place now at the end of my New English Libraries because I had enough room for them there. And this bookcase, or bookshelf rather, that we're looking at here that I'm emptying is going to be solely the reserve of the smaller format CORGI paperbacks, which is how they were printed back then. Very, very similar to the American format as used by Dell and Pocket and people like that, Bantam. Now, unfortunately, I positioned the camera so in a lot of cases I'm stood in the way. Apologies for that, we'll work around it. So just so you know what you're looking at, the shelf above the one I'm working on is all Penguin Collectors Society publications. The shelf to the right is other magazines on and books on vintage paperbacks. The shelf below that is more books about Penguin books. The shelf below the one I'm working on is John Norman's Gore books. Got a set of UK and American printings. And the set next to that is my Barry Sadler Casca books and a few other bits and pieces. So I've come back with all the new editions. So once again, with the CORGIs, there were a fair few that I already had, and all I had to do, like that one for example, was go through and choose the best one. And in a lot of cases it was very, very easy to do that. The main thing is I wanted to keep them in the correct order, and it's quite difficult to do with CORGI. It would be quite handy if someone could put together a bibliography, but they really, really don't turn up particularly in nice shape as often as they used to. They used to be really quite common, CORGI books, and I used to almost disregard them, but not anymore. Their science fiction ones with the green spines are particularly nice. I think some of their westerns, the covers in that, are absolute works of art. And trying to find them in nice condition, that's the thing that's difficult. They published a fair few sort of juvenile delinquency titles, and once again, they're scarce and collectible. It's a good publisher, CORGI, or vintage CORGI, and one which, I'd definitely like to get a few more of, but like so many of them, the natural supply seems to have dried up. You occasionally get little pockets of collections turn up on eBay. Like 10 vintage westerns and maybe 8 of them are old CORGIs. And when that happens, they generally don't go for a lot, like £1.50, £2 a pop, which isn't bad. The science fiction, obviously, a lot more. I think that's the most collectible side of vintage CORGI, is the science fiction. And they've certainly got some fantastic titles that were published as CORGIs, including Forbidden Planet, which is a real favourite of mine. all the Richard Mathesons. Harlan Ellison was one of theirs. The early Arthur C. Clarkes came out as corgis. They had a good calibre of author, shall we say. Yeah, I remember when I was doing this, the numbering was really throwing me. It was like, oh, I believe they do something similar to Pan, where they have different letter prefixes in front of a number dependent on the price. But the corgi lettering system seems much, much more complicated. They do just plain numbered ones, and then the science fiction seemed to be prefixed with an S. And then they did a series of giant corgis, which are usually with a G, a bit like the Pans. But then there's all sorts of weird offshoots which don't seem to fit in anywhere else. There are Ts, there are quite a few T series. And then there's Scotties, which are similar to the corgis, which is another series more aimed at the youngsters. So collecting corgi is fraught with difficulty, even when you're sort of cataloguing it down. So if anybody knows of a sort of guide to collecting vintage corgi books, I would be pretty interested to see that, because I've really no idea how much was actually produced, and my suspicion is there's absolutely stacks and stacks of it, and we've only seen a little bit of it here today, you know. Not a publisher I've gone out of my way to try and collect. Pretty much all the corgi that I've got has come from other collections. It's just sort of I've ended up with it, which is not a bad thing. It's just how I've ended up with it. So almost there now. So we're rebuilding the shelf, popping them all back in. Once again, nowhere near enough space, so those later ones are just at the bottom of another bookcase. So now we move on to the last big job that I had, which was the Pelicans. So this is how they were before we started. So 2 bookcases side by side with my entire Pelican collection. That's all the new editions to go in. So quite a pile of new editions in actual fact. So the first job was to get those sorted into number order. That's what I'm doing first of all. And it's similar to what we've seen prior to this. Now, with Pelicans, I collect up to Well, I'm trying to get complete the first 600, so 1 to 600, A18 to A600, of which, after I get in all of these ones that I needed, I'm just down to, I believe, about a dozen to get that first 600, and none of them are rare. So hopefully I'll be able to get those within the next couple of years. After number 600, so between 601 and 1000, I've got a smattering of books, maybe about 30 or 40 later ones that have just come my way. They're in nice condition. They're not really part of the collection, but for the time being, I'm going to keep them, But I would just like to have the first 600 complete if I could get that, And as I said, I'm not a million miles away now after this lot. It used to be, back in the day, that Pelicans just weren't really collected, but there are a few people who do collect them now, but I really don't want to be paying much more than £2.50 a book for the ones that I'm missing. In the old days, when I started collecting penguins, the Pelicans were like an appendix, like an afterthought, and it was like all these Pelicans, £1 each. So, or even less, 50p each sometimes, would be on the catalogues, and they just list the numbers. And that's how I feel a lot of people probably built their collections, was on the back of those old catalogues. But for me, I got quite lucky in that a friend I used to work with, he was retiring as a bookshop manager, and he needed to downsize a bit, and he was very much into natural history. But he knew I collected penguin books, and he had a couple of hundred like classic penguins, but he also had an incredible run of pelicans. Now at the time I already had a good 150 to 200 of them, but he had about 500, and I had all of those off him as well. So I said, yeah, I'll be glad to take them off your hands, and that's exactly what I did. And that formed the backbone of my pelican collection, such as it is today. So this first shelf then, basically it had the magazine New Biology and Science News. Now both of those I've got complete, and as I take off this front row of pelican books, you'll see those magazines there, those colourful ones behind it. So what I thought I'd do is get rid of those and just start the numbering back to number 1, because I've got a fair few series that once the pelicans are in place, I'm going to see if I've then got room to put them towards the end. So this would be my penguin scores, my peregrines, penguin plays, the buildings of England, Science News, New Biology, and penguin handbooks. So all of those need a home, basically. So this is the tail end, I think, of the Science News, or it's New Biologies. Yeah, I think that was the New Biology, of which there was like 30 odd, and the Science News, that's those ones there was about 50 odd. But that's the full sets of both of those, but they're quite dry. I've never really shown them on the channel, but both series do actually have a couple of highlights, believe it or not. I think with the Science News one, Alan Turing wrote a very good piece, which makes that one quite collectible. So anyway, I'm de-shelving the second shelf down now, because the first shelf is all in place. You can see where they're all numbered and they're all stacked. So I'm ready to get the second shelf in. And while I do each shelf, I'll use that as the opportunity to fill in all the missing spots, all the blanks, as it were. There we are. That's a ballet by Arnold Haskell. That came out as a special, first of all. So here's a first one I need to slide into position. This one I've been after for ages. Absolutely ages, that one. I've got probably 10 or so that definitely need to be upgraded, but on the whole, I mean, I'm happy with the copies that I've got. As long as they're all first Pelican printings, which they are, then I'm happy, really. These ones here are all quite scarce wartime releases, not printed on the best of paper. But so distinctive, aren't they? And very much part of the Penguin story, and part of Alan Lane's ambition to be the popular educator. I think that's how he described it. And certainly some of the Pelicans that I've read do read very, very well. I've got a few favourites. Here we are. So I'm going to be rebuilding the second shelf now, but get a little wedge in so I can put in any new additions. So I have filmed a couple of vintage Pelican videos on the main channel. I've not put any through the cleaning process though, and they certainly need it. Making sure I fill up every nook and cranny, because I know space is at a premium. But before I started, I did have one sort of spare shelf, similar to the Penguins, so I knew I had enough room to get most of these out, and I almost succeed. This bottom shelf was already quite packed. But because I created the extra space at the start by taking out the science news and the new biology magazines, it's meant that I've had plenty of room to do the shunt without too much hindrance, because I've always had room on each shelf to do it, basically. Now these bookcases, these are just 3 shelves high. And these are ones I've had for best part of 25, 30 years, and I believe they came from B&Q back in the day, or somewhere like that, you know, like a do-it-yourself store. You can't get them anymore. They were, I think, 15 quid a pop back then. They served their purpose for sure, but I do very much prefer the IKEA ones now. Those white ones, they just look a bit smarter, I think. But I'm not going to bother buying loads more bookcases, because, as I said, within the next 2 to 3 years I'll have a purpose-built dedicated library, and I'll be able to get all of these in a room floor to ceiling, and they'll just look fantastic then. They really, really will. So again, sliding in a few new additions as we work our way through. The numbering is so small on the spines of the Pelicans that even with the light full on them, it still makes them a little bit difficult to read. And historically, over time, the spines have dulled a little bit. They've gone a little bit grey. I don't really have many that are sun faded, but I have got a few that are grey. And certainly, I think there's a handful that once I've completed the first 600, I might go through them one last time and make a little note of the ones that I want to upgrade, because I've only done that for the first 200 so far. On my hands and knees again. It is a tiring job, this sorting your book collection out. But at least I'm making the most of the available space, and that's really what's the most important thing. I don't want to be wasting space that I've got there. You spot a few of these have got little blue bands around them. That was because they were published in 1956 for Penguin's 21st anniversary, and quite a few Penguins of that period had little belly bands put around them. I've got a handful. So we're on to the second of the two bookcases now. Now these are later ones. They've got much glossier front covers. Yeah, some of them are laminated, and there are lots of people who like these later 60s ones because they are much more interesting. When they started using photograph covers, the choice was really excellent, and lots of people love them. There's a very good Instagram account which focuses on the sort of the more tail end pelicans, called Pelican Fetish, which is worth a look. Once again, I've got a little bit of room on the first bookcase to fill up, which I need to do. So I'll make sure that that first bookcase is completely stacked before I move on to the second one. There we are. So I can start on the second shelf properly now. So I get all these ready so that I can just slide in all the new editions. However, I'm going to turn, as you can see, that shelf was really bowed, so I've turned it over so that over time these books can bend it back in the right direction. As I said, I've had them for best part of 30 years, so they've just suffered a little bit in that time by being overstacked. But it's okay. There we are. So you can start filing in the editions now. There we are. And these sort of later ones, they do have their own identity. They do look great, in actual fact. I had quite a few missing from this sort of tail end of the 500s. So I've ended up buying them from a dealer. As I said, they were cheap and cheerful, so that's all that matters. So these are all like 60s ones now, 1960s. A great period for Pelican, one of my favourites. But the extra weight on that bookcase is going to push it back down over the next year or two. Because it really was bowed badly, wasn't it? but it's more a sign of what I had on there historically and just how long I've had them. There we are, that's that shelf looking fine. You can't really see it's bowed from that angle. It looks absolutely fine. Here we are then, so getting this second bookcase packed away now that everything is numerically correct. I can't remember the last time I went through my Pelicans like this. It was at least a couple of years ago, maybe longer. A few more tail end ones that have come my way. None of these would have been specifically bought. They've just ended up in collections and little job lots. That's how I've ended up with them on the whole. Yeah, lots of gaps towards the end of my run. I've always sort of, by default tried to start from the earliest numbers. Same with like the Puffins, for example. That's why the first 100 were finished before the second 100, because I always made a point of trying to get the early ones out of the way first of all. It's exactly the same with the Puffins, Pelicans rather. I've concentrated on getting the early ones first. So the end of the Pelicans is in sight. Got quite a nice box set there. I don't know how common that one is. That was part of that big collection I got from my friend. It's not one I have myself, but it's nice. His entire collection, my friend's, was all picked up at like boot sales and jumble sales and stuff like that over the years. But he'd been doing that for 20 years, and he had sort of specialised in Pelicans. As I said, he preferred non-fiction. He had a big run of Observer books, was another thing he was into. Had all his Observer books off him. But I have got a few like miscellaneous stuff that I keep with my Pelicans. So these are main series Pelicans, but I've also got some Penguin Education, and I've got some Pelican Classics, which is like I think it's AC is their code. Pelican Classics. Yeah, so a little handful of Pelican Education, and then I've got the B format Pelicans are all together as well. They're at the very end of the row, just so that we can get the most of the shells. But they did a fair few in the 60s, like Penguin themselves. But we have used up that space, and as I said, we've got those other series to pull down just to make them the absolute most of it. So I hope you've enjoyed sitting through this second shunting session. They are quite epic. As I said, this was a compilation of what I'd done over 4 days in little batches of a few hours each time, and I hope you don't find them too boring. The last one seems to have gone down very well, and people seem interested in how I managed to store so many paperbacks in what is not a massive place. It's only in a loft, but I try and make the most of the space that I've got, and I think that's all you can do if you're a paperback collector. Whacking the camera there. It's in quite a confined space, and I wanted you to see sort of the action going on, so I'm sure you don't mind. But yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, of course, do please leave a comment below, leave a like on the video. If you've not already, please do hit the subscribe button. That's always going to help the channel. Here we are. These are going back lovely. So these last few Pelicans, the blue spine ones, are still under 1,000. I haven't got much post that. A few ISBN ones which I've kept because of the subject matter and if they were mint. Same as the old Penguin Education, I've kept them because I don't really collect it, but if they're mint, I will keep hold of them, because there are people who do collect Penguin Education. And then the B format's going back. Big heavy books. And that still leaves me conveniently 1 row in front of those. So I had all those books on top, those other series. So that's what I'm going to pull down now and fill that front row up in. And that's what we'll look at as we bring this video to a close. So that's my Penguin handbooks, of which I haven't got quite as many as I thought. I've got about 40. I thought I had a little bit more than that, but it's certainly a series I'm starting to keep more of an eye out for now. We got my Buildings of England, that's all the handbooks. I got Buildings of England and Peregrines and my Penguin Plays, and that rounds out that shelf with the science news and the biology, and my Penguin scores sat on top of this bookcase, which is where they're going to live for the time being. So thank you very much for watching today. I hope it's not been too boring for you. It's certainly a job that needed doing, and I was happy to share my process. and I shall look forward to seeing you again very soon with another video.